Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today's a long time coming. Today is a treat. I originally was going to do this interview a little while ago, and in the conversation leading into it, learned that the guest and I share a birthday. So we're doing it today and putting it out because we're, both Aquarians. So today's guest is a Dutch artist celebrated for her captivating figurative paintings and exploration of new contemporary realism, unveiling the complexities of archetypal female figures within the male-dominated infrastructure. Please extend a warm welcome to the talented and visionary Martine Johanna. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing? It's so good to talk to you. I don't think I'm royalty, but it's fine, yeah?
I mean, all of us, January 20th, we have crowns on our heads,
That's true.
Even if it's not visual, it's there, it exists.
Yeah.
And, like I was saying in the intro, that I've been looking forward to this. Is a long time coming. So I'm really just, excited to be able to chat. And it's very timely. You hit me up and you're like, look, I got some new work coming. So I'm like, okay, cool. So to start off, I always like to get the root, the beginning of the story or what have you. So for you, take us back to the very beginning, some of those early experiences with art, whether it was from the creating art or whether it was from the appreciating art. But, talk a bit about some of those early roots and those early foundational moments.
Yeah. So really, really early, I think drawing was always an escape for me. I grew up in a very religious community, and I remember that one day in school, I was, I think I was about 11 or something. And then my teacher, who was also a preacher, which rhymes really nicely, by the way, but he told me I was drawing a horse with wings and like a unicorn. And he told me, like, this is not of God. God hasn't created this creature. And he showed the whole classroom and he hung it up in the classroom, like in front of the classroom, with that sort of story, like, this is not from God. You shouldn't draw something that God hasn't created. And all I could think was, oh, I have my first exhibition. I was like so proud and happy that he hung that in the classroom. I don't think that was necessarily what he meant to do, but I really liked it. And I remember also when people were asked in the classroom, like, what do you want to become later when you grow up? Everybody would say, like, oh, I want to be a nurse or a firefighter. I think that's universal, right? I mean, in America, that's the same, more or less. And then I asked my mom, like, what's it called when you make a living out of drawing? And then she said, then you're an illustrator. So I remembered that. And that's what I said in that questionnaire, like the question round. And I said, I want to be an illustrator. And then later I found out what art was. Yeah. So I saw paintings, when we went to a castle, because I live in an area where there are a lot of Dutch castles still, from medieval castles and stuff. It's very romantic. And I saw paintings and I was like, oh, I want to paint. And then I saw a picture of the Mona Lisa, and I tried to copy that when I was about 15. And I did it in watercolor, and I liked it so much. And then I started to paint Monet and Manet and all the expressionists. I tried to copy those. And I wanted to be an artist because it felt like every time I would draw and paint, and I still have that, I would go to this sort of alternate universe, yeah, where everything is nice and peaceful and dreamy, and like, I love the idea of endless possibility. And I think that is really what draws me into art, is the possibility, not the things that are not possible, because that's what I heard all around me when I was small, and all the things that you couldn't do when you're a woman or a girl. Because then, there are other priorities, like you have to marry somebody and get and have children and be a housewife, or you choose a career that you can make money of and be responsible. There was a lot of like the word responsible in when I grew up. So I did I was allowed to go to the arts academy, just to stick to the work side, and but not the free arts. Although I wanted to do it, like painting and drawing. My mother said, like, you can do it, but only if you study fashion, because in fashion you can make money. Which is absolutely not true. So, but I thought, like, yeah, hell, why not? You know, because I also liked fashion design and clothes, and I love clothes so much. So I was like, yeah, fine. So I went there and I had a talk with like 6 teachers. There was a whole panel, and they all tried to convince me to go to the free arts. And then I said no, because I'm not allowed from my parents. So I did fashion, and I really liked fashion as well. And then there was sort of a hiatus. So I was a fashion designer for, I think, 10 years or so. But it felt really confining. This is like a real quick overview of how I started. And then when I started living in Amsterdam, I had my own little apartment, and I went on the streets and I met new friends, and we would go and do street art, and I would freeze my fingers off trying to handle a spray can. I wasn't like, I wasn't built for that. I just did all these kind of things, like murals and stickers, really ugly stickers also. And but I had so much fun. And at one point I was asked to do an exhibition with street artists, and from one thing led to another, and I just quit my fashion design job at one point, because I could live like exactly from selling one painting per month. And I could pay my rent and have something to eat and be happy. And that was all that I needed. So yeah.
Well, thank you. And definitely I want to comment on that before I go into this next question. You know, especially that last part. Like, I've always kind of lived this dual lifestyle because of that sort of, you know, you have an artistic goal, you want to do something creative. I wanted to be a, you know, illustrator or comic book artist and all of that stuff when I was younger. And, you know, always had sort of this interest in all of these creative things, but knowing that and being, you know, sort of told that you got to do something that's going to make money because your feet are big and shoes are expensive, you know? And so having that as a thing, and, you know, I still do that now, but looking for ways to better marry the two but I definitely romanticize sort of the artistic lifestyle. But, you know, as I, you know, get closer to 40, or as I get older, I guess that is not something for the now. That was something in the past, and that experience was great. And, you know, I'll say that. And I would always have these contractual jobs at colleges. So being around sort of the younger folks or what have you that are seeing things and trying different things. So being on that energy exists. But then also having a very busy like social schedule, a very busy podcasting schedule, it just felt like I'm not on a calendar. I'm not on a clock. I'm on my own time. And that's the thing that I think I like about at least the pieces of the sort of artistic life. And I was hearing bits of that in your, you know, description of, I did street art for a while and I was doing this, and fashion, not so much. I dig that. So it brings me to this question of how does in your current work or your, you know, more recent work, how does, you know, illustration, drawing, I mean, in fashion, whether it is the thinking behind it, whether it is the sort of application or the techniques, how does that show up in your work these days?
Oh yeah, it's a really nice question. I want to first go back to something you said just now,
Sure.
if I can remember it, by the way, because I have issues with my concentration because I have ADD, but like really diagnosed ADD. But oh no, I forgot it. I'll remember it later. Yeah, so the fashion influence, I think all creative professions are related. So it's all language, right? I mean, when you go into painting or drawing, it's a language different from words. It's like everything except words that you're saying, just like music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Music is also a language, or dance is a language. But fashion is also a language. I mean, when I say streetwear, you have an image of what that is. Or when you say red carpet, you have an image of what that is. Or, you know, a classic costume. And those are like really broad terms. So I think the expression is all related. And also fashion has this sort of language when you wear it. The only thing is that it has a restriction, which is the body. Mm. Just like illustration has a restriction that it has to convey the story that you're illustrating, for instance, right? So I don't like restrictions, so I'm much more happy to have fashion influence in my work now, because now it's like a choice of expression only, and it doesn't need to fit a wearer or has no practical use. Sure. So it's expression only. And in that sense, I use it more as an abstract a shape language, like form language. So I have a lot of pleats, for instance, in my work. Pleats or like moving fabrics that are almost symbolic for a whirlwind, or it's very constraining, or it's, you know, it communicates something, right? Yeah. So it communicates in one of the paintings, it communicates a sort of wildness and entanglement, for instance. And when I say entangled and clothes, you also immediately have an image, right? So I think all these expressions, I mean, leave out language for now, but all these expressions are a creative expression from our being that is unique to our species. You know, if you don't count elephants that draw because we gave them, paint and a brush. But, and also language. And if I add language to it, you know, rhyming or poetry, I love the dynamics of language as well. So I also play with that in some projects. I've made a book that with drawings and also a sort of a very strangely formed story that is in the past, the present, and the future, but it's all combined. Yeah, because I like to play with not reality. It's all over my work, like the sort of escapism to something else than we are now. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember now what I want to go into, because you said, like, you know, when I talk so enthusiastically about my starting period, when I started as an artist, I talked about it with my friends the other day that the older you get, the less room you have ahead of you. So the time you spend feels more urgent. And when you're younger, you don't feel the urgency yet. I mean, the urgency comes like after your 30s. Then you feel like, oh, I don't have that much time anymore. So the time you have ahead of you grows shorter and the time behind you goes bigger. I think this is something that's really not nice to hear for young people, but that's what happens. So you have to really invest in what you really like when you're younger, so you can, you know, build on that when you get older. So don't put off anything. I think if you have ambitions or feelings or love for something you want to do, you have to try and do it while you can, so you can sit back a little bit more when you get older and enjoy the choices that you made.
That's a really good point because like, and this is now I'm free jazzing now. That's a really good point where, you talk about ambition, when I do this, I'm doing this podcast at one point, there was a year when I put out 330 episodes. And,
Yeah.
Why'd you do so many? That's like, because I enjoy doing it. Well, that's too many. It's like, who's saying that? I'm the one that's doing it. And
Yeah.
or why do you talk to these people? It's sort of like and this will be great because Aquarius is I'm riding a wave, a creative wave. I call it the creative Holy Ghost. And
Yeah.
when it strikes, I just have to do it. And while I like hearing feedback from people of what they take what I'm doing as or what this might mean and what this might represent, all of that stuff, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's what I'm interested in. And, if someone likes it, great, you get it. But if you don't, that's also great. It's not for you. And I think a big piece of my style is indicative of that. And, I think, you and I are very similar in this sort of way where I think from what I gathered and listening to interviews and, us chatting beforehand, you're a free thinker. You're
Yeah.
not huge on the administrative parts of like, really, I gotta figure this out. And you're a bit of a rebel. I see it. I see the hair. You're a bit of a rebel. I see it. I dig it. So tell me about how like that shows up in how you approach your work, whether it is thematically in the themes that you're pursuing, whether it
Yeah.
is in sort of what you're exploring, or even in sort of what relationships with galleries that you're even pursuing. Tell me about sort of like you as the person and how that like shows up in your work.
Yeah. So what I feel is like, even if you're talking about podcasts, for instance, I think every conversation is valuable. Even like if your conversation is not that great, it's also a valuable thing because it's an experience, you learn from it. And I think also that's how I stand in life, more or less. I'm very open also to criticism or to like really build up criticism, like with reasoning, not with judgment only, because that's not criticism to me. I think that's a weakness if people do that. I think it's just being open to everything and learning and don't restrict other people's thinking. As long as you don't harm each other, I think everything can come into question, except that I really trust science. But even scientists, like good scientists, they keep on questioning and researching because that's what science is that you research and you try to learn something new and then you find out maybe you made a little error and then you research further and you go deeper. I really like to know everything about everything. I want to understand people. I want to understand how systems work and how all these influences work. And I really love people. I hate how they behave sometimes, but I really love people and characters and just different views and stories. And I think that's so special about us people, that we have so many stories to tell. And sometimes they're really interesting, sometimes a little bit boring, but that's also really nice, So it's, I don't know, I just feel really invigorated when I have this sort of expand to possibilities. And I think that also people that I work with, like gallerists, or they feel that enthusiasm and they feel that I'm really invested in doing better myself, trying to be open to, do I make mistakes, or can I do something different, or am I nice enough to somebody else, like am I am I developing myself, because I can be really hard on myself, and at the same time I'm always very scared to make mistakes, or to be how do you say uh, um, sometimes I struggle with my English when somebody says no, or like how do you say that? When somebody says,
Like,
I'm like, yeah, like rejects you.
yeah,
Like
rejection.
I'm very scared of rejection
Uh,
sometimes. And, but I also, when I get that, then I feel like, oh, but I survived this. Like it's not that bad as I thought, you know?
it it
So, yeah.
it's one of those things, and I didn't mean to really cut you off, but I wanted to at least mention this where again it's the same. It's the same in going through this sort of process, and I had to understand like and accept it. Where you're going through, and it definitely, I'm gonna get your take on this. You're going through and you're overly manicuring. Like imagine, we do a conversation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for every gap, all of this stuff, and looking
Mm-hmm.
for that thing that feels more perfect. It's
Yeah.
it removes it from what it actually is. It's a conversation. Conversations have those ums in it. It has those gaps, it has those pauses. And, if there are things that should come out because it's like in poor taste, or the person's like, no, this is still going to be going out, then we should probably remove this piece of it. That makes sense. It may not fit contextually.
Yeah.
But what feels like a conversation, that's what the aim is. And,
Yeah.
I get caught on a rejection thing too, where or even sort of what I feel is rejection. I might put out an episode and it's like, damn, 2 downloads. Guess I'm done, guys. And then there are other times where it's, wow, this went really well. But my thing is, it's this. It's the
Yeah.
actual connection with the person. I'm
Yeah.
not here to be a podcaster to do this. I'm here, and this is going to sound so pretentious. I feel almost hate myself for saying it, but it's really about connecting with people. It's really about building sort of relationships. You touched on like friendship as a theme. I heard that a lot in what you were saying here, what you were saying in previous podcasts. And
Yeah.
I'm always curious about how friendships maintain and how they develop when it comes to, this world with social media, with artists and being in it. Because
Yeah.
I felt like maybe I'm friends with people, but turns out maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not really there.
Oh, I've had the same. Yeah, I've had the same. Yeah, no, it's true. But also, I think the anxiousness or being rejected, I think everybody has it, and I think the people that say they don't have it at all have it the most.
Mm.
And like Elon Musk or Trump.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't want to mention them, but
No, well, Trump
no.
was one of the reasons this podcast started because I was like, screw this dude. Here's why.
Yeah, but I think people should talk more with each other and shout less, because if you shout too much, you're not communicating. I think communication is key. It sounds so corny, but it's true, We all should be able to speak with one another and try to understand. I think there's too much of a split going on everywhere.
Yes, give me the space to be wrong. Give me the space to grow. And even in it, it's curiosity too of I wonder what these people think. And I'll say this before I move into this next question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
It is I was in a meeting yesterday and we were talking about sort of racial biases here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was hearing from another person of color that they don't exist, and that specifically Black people, the call is majority Black people. This person was not Black,
Yeah.
said that I just think Black people are victims and they're just choosing to be victims. It derailed the call. People were losing their minds, and
Yeah.
rightfully so. And
Yeah.
the person was very defensive about their position. And really, it derailed it because it wasn't like a discourse. We were, the people on the call were giving her sort of that space to be wrong. Maybe she, English is not her first language, so maybe she misinterpreted. It's like, no, no, no. She spoke very eloquently about her ignorance, and it's sort of that thing. And I think, people at their root, they want to be able to have common ground with folks and be able to connect with
Yeah.
folks, but we get too affixed to sort of a belief system, and
Yeah.
it's like what drives that belief system. And
Yeah.
again, going back to this notion of perfection, right? Um, I think that's the thing. I never want to be wrong. I always want to be right. So
Yeah.
for you, with sort of the things you touched on, sort of the rejection thing, sort of being very hard and very critical of yourself at times. I'm like I said, I'm the same way. We're on the same page. So, uh,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on like perfect or imperfect work?
Yeah. I think that is a thing. You can't really put your finger on it,
Hmm.
and because you can't, it's like an unobtainable ideal. It's like utopia, and utopia is only utopia because it's something you never will get. It's the impossible thing to strive for because you have your talents and you have your practice, and those combined will give you your best at that time, and you can strive for something better, and it will make you grow, but it never goes as fast as you would like it to go.
Yeah.
But I think that's not a bad thing because I think growth takes time. It's the same like if you get money tomorrow, like $1 million, you'll be able to buy anything you want almost. Say 10 million, 100 million. But then you're not grateful anymore.
Right.
So I think the experiences are so much more worth uh, than having the perfection. Perfection is something you can strive for. I mean, that's my sensible side that's talking now. But I know that I'm harsh on myself because I know that because of what I've been through as a child already, and later on also as a woman. I've had a difficult relationship with my mom, and she had high expectations of me, and we had a very strained relationship. There was a little bit of violence in the house and some neglect on some part. And on the other side, I really loved her, and she's sort of a muse also. It's really complicated, mothers and daughters stuff. Yeah. But I've also been sexually assaulted when I was smaller and also when I was older a couple of times. And then, your self-worth takes a hit. And I think that's also when you said about black people like that was it a lady that said it? I said
Yes,
lady.
it was. Yeah.
I said lady. Like we're in Mississippi. But sorry for the but yeah, it's like sometimes men say it about women, that they're always playing the victim. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be a woman of color, because that must be even harder in life. But I know how it is to be a woman and not have freedom always because people take advantage of being stronger, and you're isolated. So, yeah, in that sense, I think, the self-worth thing plays into also when I work and how harsh I am on myself. It has to be, it has the roots in being seen as something that's not worth something. Yeah.
I hear you. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's we have these real conversations, and at times when something that's real and it's something that plays a role in sort of the thinking that goes into the work or how we approach our work or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
sometimes people want the really clean and sanitized answers. Like, no, here's the real answer. And I had this idea because us Aquariuses, we're fake philosophers. I had this notion of, I call it like perceived deficits, and however you maybe perceive yourself, or you maybe act in accordance to. So like here, and I would imagine different parts, but like here, if you're of a certain size, for sake of argument, like I'm 6'4", probably like 280 something, but I was 350 not long ago, and you know you hear these things of, oh, you're lazy because you're overweight. You're this because so you work harder than the other person, and you're already working hard. And it's some of those things that's like having like a fat guy mentality. of,
Yeah.
just wanting to really show that your worth, the quality of what you do, how you go about what you do. And that
Yeah.
extends in the professional realm, that extends in the professional and art realm, but it extends on how we view ourselves. And all of that stuff is baked in. So
Yeah.
yeah, or even this notion where I've heard at times, because I am who I am, I can only be who I am, right? And
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
folks say, "Why do you talk to these white artists? Why do you talk to these artists from other places? You should be talking to the black artists." And I was just like, I talk to whoever I find interesting. I don't think that's black enough. I was like, didn't ask you. And but it's
No,
sort of this, yeah.
it's a skin deep. Come on, man. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
and it's something where it's other people's perspective on what and how you should exist, and it extends into what your contribution is to the canon that you're working in. Like,
Yeah.
well, I think your work should be about this. I've had so many people hit me up in DMs, and I want to almost screenshot them but to hit me up in DMs, you should ask these types of questions as a and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
identity component to it. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very,
But
very odd.
I do understand it though, because, I I understand it from a historical perspective also, and from a current perspective still. Um, but I always think it's interesting to talk to anybody, so that's the only difference. But I don't come from a group that's, considered a minority, except that I'm a woman. And so that's also, and I don't like the word minority at all. I just think equality, even though we're not there yet, I would really love that everybody would think like that, because it would make such a difference. And unfortunately, it's not. So I do understand the sort of feeling for, being seen and heard.
Yeah.
People who say they want you to ask questions on black artists, for instance, because they need more of a stage, maybe. I feel that also for women artists somehow. I mean, that's still different, but I don't know. I understand it, that people want that, because I don't think it's a victim mentality also. I don't think so. I think it's just natural, that it's always the same people that get the chances.
Mhm.
And um, yeah, no, I really understand it.
That's why it's important to have that independence to be able to do what you want and how you want and let that show it. So I, and what I do is all baked in. I try not to do the performative thing of this month we're only going to talk with queer artists, or this month only artists of color. It's just
Yeah,
like, look, it's all baked in
yeah,
out this sort of body of work. And speaking of bodies of work, I must transition into this upcoming
yeah,
exhibit. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I want to see, that was my attempt to really hard left transition. Um,
yeah,
but I want to talk about a particular ghost. It's set to debut soon. Let's talk about it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
could you share a bit about the overall inspiration and concept behind the collection? I mean, I got my
yeah,
preview that I'm going to keep close to the vest, but
yeah.
I really, it was a great surprise to get the visuals yesterday. So definitely want to talk a bit about that. So please tell us, share with us.
Yeah, so a particular ghost already says, like, it's almost like a specific thought, but maybe a negative one or something that haunts me. And because I've been in therapy, because I'm already, being open about everything. I was in therapy for PTSD, for extended PTSD. So I've had EMDR sessions and other sessions to cope with trauma. And it was long overdue. But then I thought, like, oh, I have all these ghosts in my head, because I still suffer from noise in my head, where I get like really a lot of voices. It's not like I'm not mentally ill in that way, but I just have sounds in my head, and
Sure.
it's like a stress symptom. And sometimes they get louder, and I get all these sort of entangled thoughts, and I don't know. And somehow painting also helps me cope with them. And I wanted to make something really different this time. So I thought, let's just pluck those thoughts out of my head. And I have these really sort of almost horror-like dreams sometimes, where I'm at places where I'm all alone. And then I thought, like, why don't I paint places that I see in my dreams? So this might be new to people who know my work, but I've painted a couple of landscapes this time. And they're sort of enclosed in abstract forms, almost like my brain shapes. And they're like little views into my dream world, where it's like desolate, like nobody's there, but it's in forests, and it's really a little bit like the place where I grew up, where there are a lot of trees and nature, but it still feels quite confined, because my youth was sort of like that. It was very romantic in the sense of nature and, castles around, and like a girl, you're like, oh, princess, I'm a princess. I'm a secret princess. Every girl thinks that when they're young. And on the other side, there were a lot of churches, and there was a lot of like restriction and judgment. And I used to fight a lot when I was small, and stood up for myself, literally, against groups of boys. I don't know where I got the guts from, but I always fought for myself. Anyway, but and I somehow that feeling of that enclosement, and sort of drive to hide, but also drive to stand up for myself, or to expose myself and be free to do that. That's all in the show. Yeah. So it goes from desolate, sort of enclosed scenes in forests with like buildings, or it goes into like pornography, almost like 2 pornography images. Almost.
I got questions about those.
Yeah, I know. And they are super exposed, and I did those because they made me feel uncomfortable, and that's why I did them, because that was something I also challenged. Like, I had a lot of my mind I just wanted to put out. So it's a lot of experiment and taking chances, because people are always used to what you make, and they expect that you make more of that. So I did something different this time a little bit, and it's very scary. But I felt like I had to have the particular ghosts out of my mind and onto paintings and drawings. Yeah.
Scary is good. What was the sort of, like, when the initial sort of moment, like, you worked on, let's say, the first piece, into when you're like, all right, I think this is the full body? What was that sort of time frame?
Yeah, so I started with the 2 pornography images months ago, and and they are large. Like, they're not that large. Like, they're almost as tall as me, and but I had to make them. I was like, I want to show like a woman that is excited, like in heat, and that has her own desires, because you're never shown that. It's always like men, like everywhere there's like totem poles, and like everywhere things are erect, but women you hardly see very excited unless it's porn, so true. And then everything, like and also women are always judged for being exposed, because then you're like a hoe or a slut, but for men there are no words like that. There are no words for men that are judgmental about being sexually active. Then you're a hero, so. And I wanted to counteract that, but the what happened, and I hope that everybody who listens to this finds this as funny as I do, what happened was that every day I walked into my studio, I saw vaginas, open vaginas, and I was horrified. And I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And then, but I thought, well, if I'm this uncomfortable, I should really do it.
Yeah.
You know, I should just go on and do this and like open myself up to criticism. And, you know, so one painting is really almost a landscape, like, you know, a woman, what is threatening about a woman?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you want to ask a question about.
Yeah. So I have questions about sort of the two that come to mind. A round object has no sharp edge. I like that title. What inspired sort of that reflection, like, you know, sort of the duality, the being a threat, or being perceived as a threat, female sexuality being perceived as a threat, and sort of that duality of being like an object of lust for, you know, folks, and then also being chastised or what have you. And it's like, you shouldn't, but I want that, but you shouldn't be, but I want that. Like, so talk about sort of the thinking that and the reasoning, or just why was that of interest?
Well, the thing is that a round object has no sharp edge is actually like a science term, because if you have a ball, it has no sharp edge because it disappears.
Yeah.
In the orb. And you know, women's bodies are seen as how the more round, the more attractive. But at the same time, it's perceived as a threat. It's like you have to hide it. You can't show it online. Every nipple is like an offense. If you're too sexual, you're a slut. If you're, you know, there's so much like harmful. I think that's the most harmful about the human body, about the female body, is the harm that is projected on it.
Yeah.
Because the body itself is not harmful. It gives life if you're lucky, you know. It gives life. You can enjoy it. Like, there's literally nothing harmful about a woman's body. But all we do is treat it like something like, I wanted to do this, like a cross.
Like, stay away.
Like a vampire. No.
Women.
And it's like, you know, it's, I mean, it starts in the Bible with Eve and being the temptress. And then, you know, she messes up everything because she wants to know too much. And the women shouldn't know that much because, you know, you don't want to have that power in women's hands. And it's like, it's so, it's so cringy if you think about it. And then I was like, every time I walked into the studio and saw that work, I felt ashamed. This is not a lie. Like, I felt shame. And I was like, why do I feel ashamed? It's because that's all I've heard ever since I was growing up. And I came into my teens, is that I had to be ashamed of my body. I had to be ashamed of my behavior. I had to be ashamed of making choices for myself, looking for freedom, for expression, you know, and it's oppressionist. So that's, for me, the painting is freedom, you know. So I get really like, ugh.
I hear you. I like it.
Yeah, and the other painting,
Slow motion, right?
Sorry?
But the other one you were going to describe, slow motion?
Yeah, slow motion. Yeah. You had a question about that as well.
So with this painting is conveying fragility, whirling emotions, and longing for freedom. Again, freedom's important. How do you use sort of the artistic elements to capture like these emotions within that piece?
Yeah, so it has a jello in it, which nobody expected that, I think, until I said it. That has jello on plates, like from a sort of a 50s commercial. And this woman is also very exposed, and her dress is almost, you know, killing her or choking her, or she's wrapped up in it, and it's a whirlwind of fabric, and there are 3 hands in it, and it feels like, somebody said, it feels like she's being assaulted. but it's not that, because she's excited and she maybe wants it, but she also has some kind of distance in her face. And they both the paintings have sort of an ideal beauty in their face, but the face also seems a little bit pasted on, because we have this sort of beauty ideal that we all want to. I say we all as women. I can't speak for all women, but a lot of women are like influenced that they have to use a filter when they make a selfie, or you want to stay forever young. So this painting is more about this constant, like it has a time span, just like those food elements. It goes bad really quickly.
Yeah.
It can't stay perfect forever. It's only perfect for a certain amount of time. And mostly men say that about women, that women don't grow old very nicely. Men get more handsome is then the saying, which is not true. It depends if you have good genes or not. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you have good genes and you take care of yourself, you look better, but then, it has a short time span where you're perceived as being beautiful and attractive, and it feels so fragile. Like you're always under pressure when you're a woman. And I've been pregnant a couple of times, which all failed. And, my time slot is gone already. I don't really want children, because if I think about my mom, I'm much too scared that I'm like her. So I don't want to have that. So, but still, it's all these things that as a woman you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And everybody around you finds it normal that you are under that time pressure. And then men, even friends of mine, say, "Oh, I have time. If I want children, I can just take a younger girlfriend." Or and I'm like, dude, what you're saying? It's like, ooh. Yeah.
That was a thing that would come up in conversations that I would have, and even exploring that idea of, I don't have any kids, but exploring that idea. And I was like, I kind of want to hang out with my kid. I don't want to be like 50 and have like a 2-year old. That's just not my particular vibe or what have you. And
No.
it's sort of a consideration of like, you know, how that thing works. And I know it's much harder for women, because you'll hear the thing of, well, your clock is ticking, you don't want to.
Yeah.
This urgency there that we don't share in that same sort of, I guess, biological way or even social way. Society is like, when are you going to hurry up and have some babies? It's like,
I've had a woman once said to me, like, "Oh, you don't know what you're missing." I was like, "You don't know why I am missing it." So don't say that, dude. It's like, move. But people don't mean to be that, so like that about it. But it is true. And I also, I think about men the same. Like, you don't want to go with your walking stick. Son, you want to go baseball? Wait, let me get my walking stick. Give me 30 minutes and I'll be right with you. And it's like, I don't know. I think it's just, yeah. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who said like that dating women is like transactional, more or less. That he thought if he paid for dinner, then he had the right to have sex. But if she would put out the first night, like he wouldn't date her anymore, because then she wouldn't be as valuable. And I was like, oh my God, we're in the 50s. I'm in a time machine. What's happening?
it's a ridiculous concept that so many, that it comes back, that it is these faux alpha, all of that stuff. And I think, frankly, what happens is, and it goes back to one of the things you touched on earlier, that people aren't communicating of what their values are and what they actually want. So because things are positioned so often like a transaction, because some of the music is like, you should be using guys for these things and these resources and so on. There's some conditioning in that way.
Of course.
But then people just think like, oh, this is how things work. And I think when we get into sort of the mixing of generations, and that's another thing, because I remember talking with one of my friends, and it's like, it's a lot of people who want to be sugar babies that aren't giving out sugar. And I was just like, that's not how that transaction works because we're agreeing to the transaction. You know what I mean? But it's a very interesting way that we go
Yeah,
about things. And to the point of the point, I guess, we haven't even sorted out like whether we even like each other and how we do some of these things. These are advanced classes, you know,
yeah,
relationships, on dating, on sexuality, on sex. And we just kind of like skim through the cliff notes and just
yeah,
think that, oh, okay, yeah, we're good. We can just do this. Now to the advanced courses. You don't know the first level yet.
yeah. No, but I think it all comes down to if you're from an equalist standpoint, it comes down to have respect for one another
Yes.
and not expect everything because you think you are somehow higher or better or stronger, or if you expect something from somebody else without, it's not a transaction. The transaction should be respect and interest. Have an interest in another person.
Yeah.
Have questions for somebody instead of judgment,
Yeah.
because a question is so much more interesting. So, I mean, we go beyond now the beauty perspective or, a lifespan of attractiveness. I think it's just having interest in each other and having respect. It goes so far. It will deliver you. It will give you so much more than judgment or, thinking in boxes
Yeah.
and have expectations from somebody else that you've set, but are not necessarily the ones that the other person have,
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm we're like I said, right here. Just right here.
Yeah.
Hey. Um, and I think sort of my last question, I think I got my last question actually in there. Cause like you were saying, you were giving your beginning, you were giving, your intro, but here's the funny thing. I always like when people give longer answers because it makes my job easier because I could just start checking off answers, checking off questions, right? It's like, okay, I got that one
Mm,
answered. Great. So it makes my job easier. So shout out to you. Um, so with that, I want to move into sort of the last chunk of these rapid fire questions for you. So
yeah.
are you ready for these? I don't know, because just
I hope so. Let's see.
so as I tell everybody, and this is going to be a challenge because I think we have a fair amount of similarities. So I don't, I'm going to tell you the same thing I would tell myself. Don't overthink these. Don't overthink.
Uh-huh.
All right. So this can be in whatever language. What is your favorite word?
Oh. Oh, that ask an ADHD person. Uh, I think psychotic.
Okay. When and I think I heard an answer for this in a previous podcast, but I'll just ask you, when do you usually start working during the day? At what time? What part of the day?
Yeah. Not earlier than 11 in the morning.
Okay.
But I go on at night most of the time.
I mean, it's night there currently. So,
Yeah.
um, da, 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 da. Okay. I noticed this one, so I'm definitely going to ask. What is your favorite Stephen King movie?
Oh.
I listen.
Yeah, well, the favorite Stephen King movie is The Shining, but I know he doesn't like it. But I've read all Stephen King books.
Okay.
Yeah.
I I um I didn't put a lot of respect on The Shining initially, and then upon rewatching it and watching the documentary, I think Room 237,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
this is amazing. This is great. And you
Yeah,
know,
I'm a big Kubrick fan, so yeah.
and I went into seeing Doctor Sleep with that sort of energy, and I was like, this couldn't be as good, but it's definitely in a movie that I enjoyed. I liked Doctor Sleep as a sort of follow up and a sequel to it, but definitely it had an uphill battle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't like Doctor Sleep that much
Oh man, you lose the
because
Aquarius.
I don't think I thought it was too much trying to do the Kubrick thing. But if you're not Kubrick, you should do your own thing, I think. But that's sometimes I can't get over my pet peeves. So when they use the same music. I thought the music was misplaced sometimes,
Yeah.
and I thought it was too slow and too heavily on the dramatics and too explanatory, which I don't like, because that's sometimes something that Stephen King does, that he explains his stories too much, and I like the mystery. So that's what I liked about The Shining, that there was a lot of open to interpretation stuff. And I don't need a further explanation, you know.
That's legit. That's legit. That's legit. No. I mean,
Yeah.
as a person that also does a movie review podcast, I might have to have you on to talk some movies. We might have to talk some movies.
I have seen almost every good movie there is. Like I binge watch movies, like, but in a good way.
Yeah.
I know I have one of my best friends. He's like, no, you should watch less and more specific, la la la. But he's very like very specific. But I have watched a lot of horror. I'm a big horror fan, like a horror fanatic.
I'll get into the documentaries and all of that stuff. I have the whole Shudder plan, watch that pretty regularly. And
I love A24 films. A24.
Yes.
Like they call it elevated horror, which I find very pretentious, art horror. But still, I really like the genre. So it's fine by me if they call it like that.
Because I think The Witch was one of those A24s. And for a long time, I would just troll
Stoker.
People. Yeah, I would troll people, and I was just like, live deliciously. They're like, stop it. Like, don't come to me like that, because I don't like goats, right? So when I was just like, nah, I don't like this. This is some pagan shit. I don't like it. I ain't really with it. I don't know. It's the church.
Hereditary is also really good. And so many. Yeah.
Heads off of that.
Have me on your movie podcast as well.
Absolutely. So this is the last one I got for you. Rapid fire question. And it can only be one sentence. All right. So keep this in mind. What would you say to Delight Delirium?
Oh, that's my.
What would you say to your younger, pretentious self?
Oh my God, that was my pretentious street art name. I would like to say, like, you can do this right now, but you'll get over yourself.
I definitely was super excited to add that. I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
Yeah, because I know I remember when I at exhibitions I had to introduce myself, and when you shake someone's hand and you're saying your delight of delirium, you learn pretty quickly to use your own name. You know, you get over it really fast. It's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I had to choose early on, like in the beginning of my whole podcast thing. My initial radio name was Rob Goodtimes, and I was like, it's not gonna last. It's not gonna last, Playboy.
You sound like a gigolo.
I do. It wasn't going to be a long-term sort of fit. So I just went with a shortened version of my actual real name. So, and that's what it is. And
yeah. So I like it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So that is pretty much it for today's conversation. But two things. One, I want to thank you for coming on. We got it. We had this time. This has been great. I want to thank you for coming on. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners any details. You got the show coming up, website, social media, anything you want to share in these final moments. The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, you can find my work at martinejohanna.com. It will probably be somewhere in the podcast description. And you're welcome to visit the show. The show opens in Hashimoto Contemporary in LA the 13th of January, and I will be there as well. And also, I will be doing a residency in New York in the spring summer. So I'll be living in America for just 2.5 months, but it's awesome. So and I'm gonna be exhibiting then as well, probably. I'll have to see. But that's it. And check out my work. I hope you guys like it, and if not, it's okay too. I'm open to anything.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Martine Johanna for coming on to the pod. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.